Zik-Tox adjusted his observation lenses as he settled into his recording station. 7 cycles had passed since humans joined the Galactic Council, and they remained an enigma to most species. As the xenological recorder tasked with documenting council proceedings, Zik had developed a particular fascination with these small, soft-skinned beings. "I've reviewed the footage thousands of times," Zik murmured to his colleague Vorax, whose 6 eyes darted continuously around the Grand Council chamber. "There's something distinctly unsettling about their perpetual calmness." The Grand Council chamber stretched before them, a vast architectural marvel with curved ceilings that captured and redirected sound with perfect clarity. Delegation zones formed concentric rings around the central speaking platform, each outfitted with holographic displays and communication systems. The recorder's bench where Zik and Vorax sat provided an unobstructed view of all proceedings, while remaining discreetly positioned near the upper gallery. "What troubles me," Zik continued as his skin shifted to a contemplative blue hue, "is that their classification as Type 4 potential threats seems at odds with their behavior. They've been nothing but diplomatic since joining." Vorax's middle eyes blinked in rapid succession. "That's precisely what's disconcerting. A species that evolved on a death world, with historical records documenting millennia of warfare, shouldn't be this restrained." "Their ambassador is arriving," Zik noted, his epidermis flickering to alert orange as the human delegation entered the chamber. Ambassador Dana Powell led the small group, her posture perfect, her expression composed in that distinctly human way that revealed almost nothing. She wore the formal diplomatic attire of Earth's United Nations Space Command, a tailored blue uniform with minimal ornamentation except for a small planetary emblem at her collar. Behind her walked Commander Jack Foster, the military liaison, his face equally unreadable, but with eyes that seemed to catalog everything in the room. Completing the trio was cultural specialist Dr. Mew, who carried a compact data slate and walked with a scholar's thoughtful gait. "Notice how the commander scans the room," Vorax whispered. "Military training?" "Undoubtedly," Zik responded, his skin shifting to a deeper orange. "But, unlike Haxan warriors, he displays no aggressive posturing. Humans seem to internalize their predatory nature remarkably well." The 3 humans took their positions at the Earth delegation station, exchanging brief nods with representatives from allied species. Ambassador Powell activated her station's communication array with practiced efficiency, her movements economical and precise. High Counselor Dreza of the Paxian Collective swept onto the central platform, the traditional robes of office flowing around his segmented limbs. His deep voice resonated through the chamber as he called the emergency session to order. "Esteemed members of the Galactic Council," Dreza intoned, "we convene today to address a matter of territorial dispute in Sector 7, specifically concerning the alleged encroachment by Haxan vessels into a region under Earth's protective covenant, according to Treaty 5924. A ripple of murmurs spread through the chamber. Sector disputes were common, but rarely escalated to emergency sessions. "The chair recognizes Representative Grow of the Haxan Empire," Dreza announced. The Haxan delegate rose with a clatter of exoskeletal plates. Standing nearly 3 meters tall, Grow's imposing physiology was accentuated by ceremonial armor that emphasized his species' naturally armored physique. The translator rendered his clicking speech into the council's common language. "This council's time is wasted on such trivialities," Grow began, contempt evident even through the translation filters. "Sector 7 contains nothing of strategic value except a pre-space civilization on a resource-poor world. Our mining vessels have begun preliminary operations in the asteroid belt of the system, operations that will not impact the primitives whatsoever." Zik noticed Ambassador Powell's expression remained unchanged, though her fingers tapped a subtle pattern on her console. Commander Foster shifted his weight almost imperceptibly, while Dr. Mew made a brief notation on her data slate. High Counselor Dreza turned toward the Earth delegation. The chair recognizes Ambassador Powell of Earth. Powell rose smoothly. Thank you, High Counselor. The Haxan representative's characterization of Sector 7 as nothing of strategic value is precisely why Earth accepted protective responsibility for the region. The Nakari civilization is developing according to their natural progression, and Treaty 5924 explicitly designates Earth as their protectorate. She paused, her voice remaining measured. We remind the Haxan Empire that all extraction operations in protected sectors require consultation with and approval from the designated protective power. Earth received no such request for operations in Sector 7. Gro's exoskeletal plates clicked rapidly, a sign of dismissive irritation that the translator didn't need to interpret. The treaty was established when you were barely known to the Council. 7 cycles is insufficient time for a species to establish meaningful protectorate rights, especially one as limited in scope as humanity. Our commitment to protecting developing civilizations is not limited by our relatively recent arrival to the Council, Powell replied, her tone perfectly diplomatic despite the insult. We respectfully request that Haxan vessels withdraw from Sector 7 until proper protocols can be established. Withdrawal is unnecessary, Gro retorted. The Nakari will never even detect our presence. Zik's skin rippled with purple anxiety. The Haxan are deliberately provocative, he whispered to Vorax. Their dismissiveness of treaty obligations is concerning. Indeed, Vorax agreed. But observe the humans, still so contained. If a Drexian representative were so insulted, secretory glands would be activated by now. High Counselor Dreza raised a limb for order. Let us explore potential compromise. Ambassador Powell, what would Earth consider an acceptable resolution? Powell nodded appreciatively. Earth recognizes the resource potential of Sector 7's asteroid belt. We propose establishing extraction parameters that would allow limited Haxan operations with environmental safeguards and zero contact with Nakari civilization. Earth monitoring stations would ensure compliance, and fair resource allocation could be negotiated. Gro's translator couldn't fully capture the derision in his response. Earth proposes to allow Haxan operations. Your species emerged from your gravity well barely 30 cycles ago. The Haxan Empire has explored 1,000 sectors, while your ancestors were crafting primitive stone tools. We do not require permission from evolutionary newcomers. The chamber grew tense. Several delegation members shifted uncomfortably, while others leaned forward in anticipation. Zik noticed Ambassador Powell's expression finally change, but only slightly, her eyes narrowing a fraction before she composed herself. High Counselor, Powell began. Given Representative Gro's position, I would like to request that my military liaison address the Council. Dreza considered this unusual request. The chair recognizes Commander Foster of Earth. What happened next would be replayed in xenopolitical study programs across the galaxy for cycles to come. Commander Jack Foster stepped forward, taking Powell's place at the speaking position. Unlike the ambassador's composed demeanor, Foster's body language subtly shifted. His posture straightened further, his eyes narrowed, and the corners of his mouth turned down slightly. Thank you, High Counselor, Foster began, his voice noticeably different from Powell's diplomatic tone, sharper, with a cadence that seemed to contain something coiled and waiting. Before I begin, I should explain something about humanity that may not be apparent to this council. He paused, scanning the chamber. What you're seeing right now, our careful speech, our measured responses, our diplomatic phrasing, this is what we call our polite mode. It's something we developed through our historical progression. Foster's lips formed what humans called a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. And it can be turned off when necessary. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Zik's skin flashed yellow with surprise. Representative Gro, Foster continued, his voice dropping slightly. You mentioned our ancestors crafting stone tools while the Haxan explored space. That's accurate. But do you know what we did with those stone tools? We used them to cooperate better than any other tribe that wouldn't farm. We used them to practice for theoretical invasions. We built civilizations while imagining how to destroy other civilizations, even when none existed to threaten us. Foster began to pace, something rarely done at the council podium. Humanity respects peace until peace stops working. We prefer polite conversation until polite conversation becomes one-sided. We value diplomacy until diplomacy is mistaken for weakness. His voice had transformed entirely now. Something raw and ancient seemed to resonate beneath the words. Let me be extremely clear about what happens if Haxan vessels don't withdraw from Sector 7 immediately. This won't be a treaty dispute anymore. This won't be a diplomatic incident. This will become something your historical records don't have a classification for. Zik's datapad chimed with an urgent alert. His assistant, Ven K, had forwarded monitoring data from Sector 7. What Zik saw caused his skin to cycle rapidly through multiple colors. Vorax, he whispered urgently. Look at this. Earth has deployed a fleet to Sector 7. Not the 20 vessels they've registered with the Council. There are over 50 ships surrounding the Haxan mining operation. Vorax's eyes widened simultaneously. Impossible. How did they conceal such a fleet? The logistics alone would require... Their conversation was interrupted by a holographic projection that materialized in the center of the chamber, evidently transmitted from the Earth fleet. A human female in a military uniform appeared, her insignia identifying her as Admiral Helen Wu. This is Admiral Wu of Earth Defense Force 7th Fleet, she announced, her voice clear and commanding. All Haxan vessels in Sector 7 are hereby instructed to power down extraction equipment and prepare for escort to the sector boundary. Failure to comply within 30 minutes will be considered a hostile action requiring appropriate response. This is not a negotiation. The chamber erupted into chaos. Representatives from dozens of species began speaking at once. High Counselor Dreza struggled to restore order, his amplified voice barely cutting through the tumult. Grow stood rigid, his exoskeletal plates now clicking so rapidly they created a continuous sound. This is outrageous! A military threat on the council floor! High Counselor, I demand— You demand nothing, Foster interrupted, his voice somehow cutting through the noise without shouting. You violated a treaty. You dismissed diplomatic resolution. Now, you face consequences. Your mining vessels are currently surrounded by Earth warships with targeting systems active. The only demand being made is ours. Withdraw immediately. The chamber fell silent. In 7 cycles of Earth's Council membership, no one had witnessed this aspect of humanity, this sudden transformation from diplomatic partners to military enforcers. Just as the tension reached its peak, Ambassador Powell smoothly stepped forward again, gently moving Commander Foster aside. Her expression had returned to its diplomatic composure, though perhaps with the slightest hint of added confidence. High Counselor, esteemed representatives, she began, her voice once again the model of diplomatic restraint. Earth would greatly prefer a peaceful resolution to this situation. We propose the following. Haxan vessels will withdraw from Sector 7 immediately. Following withdrawal, Earth will host formal negotiations regarding potential limited resource extraction that respects the Nakari civilization's development rights. She turned slightly toward Grow. We remain committed to finding mutually beneficial arrangements that respect all parties' interests while upholding Council treaties. Our fleet deployment is merely a safeguard to ensure protection of the Nakari during this unfortunate misunderstanding. Grow's translator struggled to capture the complex mix of rage and calculation in his response. This demonstration of force will be remembered. Ambassador, the Haxan Empire does not respond well to threats. Not threats. Representative Grow, Powell corrected gently. Consequences. There's a meaningful distinction. Now, shall we proceed with an orderly withdrawal and subsequent negotiations, Or would you prefer to escalate this situation further? Gro's exoskeletal plates shifted into a pattern that Zik recognized as grudging acquiescence. Our vessels will withdraw, temporarily, to prevent unnecessary conflict. But this matter is far from resolved. A wise decision, Powell replied with a diplomatic nod. Earth looks forward to productive discussions. High Counselor Dreza, visibly relieved, formally concluded the emergency session. As the delegations began to disperse, Zik noticed how other representatives gave the human delegation a wider berth than before, their body language betraying new wariness. "Did you see that?" Vorax whispered, all 6 eyes fixed on the departing humans. They completely changed the power dynamic with a single fleet deployment and a shift in communication style. Zik's skin had settled into a contemplative violet. What troubles me most is that we never detected their hidden fleet. How many more ships do they have that we don't know about? How many other sectors have they quietly secured? Perhaps their polite mode extends to their military disclosures as well, Vorax suggested. I'm beginning to understand their Type 4 classification better now. Zik nodded slowly. I need to update my recordings with this new behavioral data. The Council's understanding of human diplomatic and military strategy requires significant revision. 3 rotational cycles later, the Grand Council chamber once again filled with representatives for another emergency session. Word had spread quickly through diplomatic channels, and attendance was notably higher than usual, with observer galleries packed with additional staff members eager to witness the proceedings. The Haxan delegation had expanded considerably, now including several armor-clad warriors in ceremonial battle dress. A clear message, though technically within protocol for species with martial traditions. Representative Gro sat at the center of the expanded delegation, his exoskeletal plates polished to an intimidating shine. The Earth delegation remained unchanged. Ambassador Powell, Commander Foster, and Dr. Mu entered with the same measured composure they always displayed, apparently untroubled by the Haxan show of force. High Counselor Dreza called the session to order. This emergency session has been called at the request of the Haxan Empire regarding alleged treaty violations in Sector 7. The chair recognizes Representative Gro. Gro rose, his translator activating. Esteemed council members, the Haxan Empire has uncovered disturbing evidence of Earth's hypocrisy. While accusing us of treaty violations, they have themselves established an unauthorized presence on Nari Prime, the very world they claim to protect under Treaty 5924. Murmurs spread through the chamber as Gro continued. Their non-interference policy is a deception. Our intelligence confirms Earth has constructed a facility on the planet's surface, directly violating the development protocols they claim to uphold. This council must immediately revoke Earth's protectorate status and censure their representatives for this deception. High Counselor Dreza turned toward the Earth delegation. These are serious allegations. Ambassador Powell, how does Earth respond? Powell rose calmly. High Counselor, Earth acknowledges the establishment of a small monitoring station on Nari Prime's uninhabited southern continent. This facility is automated, environmentally isolated, and employs advanced concealment technologies to prevent any possibility of detection by or interaction with the Nakari civilization. She activated a holographic display, showing a modest structure nestled into a mountainside, nearly invisible against the natural terrain. This station's sole purpose is to monitor for exactly the kind of unauthorized incursions that prompted our previous emergency session. Its presence is consistent with our protective responsibilities. Gro's exoskeletal plates clicked rapidly. A convenient explanation for a clear treaty violation. The facility contains human personnel and defense capabilities, hardly a simple monitoring station. The Haxan Empire demands immediate council action. The chamber grew tense as delegations whispered among themselves. Many seemed unsure which side to support. Earth's practical, but potentially problematic interpretation of their protectorate rights, or the Haxan Empire's technically correct but suspiciously motivated objection. Just as High Counselor Dreza prepared to speak, an unexpected voice cut through the murmurs. "If I may address the council, High Counselor." All eyes turned to a Haxan, who had risen from the far end of their delegation, not among Gro's immediate supporters, but rather from the scientific advisory section. The Haxan's exoskeletal plates displayed the subtle iridescent pattern that indicated senior academic status. "The chair recognizes Science Director Zantur of the Haxan Empire," Dreza announced, surprise evident in his voice. "Esteemed Council," Zantur began, his translator conveying a distinctly different cadence from Gro's aggressive tone. "I feel compelled to provide critical context to these proceedings." Gro turned sharply toward his compatriot, exoskeletal plates shifting to a warning pattern. But Zantur continued undeterred. "While Representative Gro raises technical concerns about Earth's monitoring station, he has failed to inform this council about the true nature of Haxan interest in Sector 7. Zantur activated his own holographic display, which showed chemical formulas, internal Haxan communications, and surveillance imagery. These records document an unauthorized research program led by Gro's faction within our empire, a program developing technologies explicitly prohibited by Treaty 8942, spatial displacement weapons. The chamber erupted. Spatial displacement technology had been banned for 300 cycles after devastating an entire civilization. Its development was among the most serious violations of council law. "This is treason!" Gro shouted, lunging toward Zantur. The Haxan warriors moved instantly, but not to protect Zantur. Instead, 4 of them seized Gro himself, restraining him as he thrashed against their grip. Zik's skin flashed between yellow shock and deep orange focus as he recorded every detail of this unprecedented scene. "A Haxan internal power struggle playing out on the council floor," he whispered to Vorax. And somehow, the humans seemed completely unsurprised. Indeed, Ambassador Powell and her team maintained their characteristic composure, though Commander Foster allowed himself the slightest hint of what humans called a smile. High Counselor Dreza struggled to restore order as Zantur continued, his voice cutting through the chaos. The extraction operation in Sector 7 was a cover. Certain rare elements in the system's asteroid belt are crucial components for displacement technology. Representative Gro's faction sought these materials while concealing their true purpose from both the Council and the Haxan Emperor himself. Haxan security personnel had now surrounded not only Gro, but several of his supporters, effectively placing them under arrest before the entire Council. The remaining Haxan delegation seemed as shocked as everyone else. "I have transmitted complete documentation to all Council members," Zantur concluded. "The Haxan Empire officially withdraws all complaints against Earth's protective measures and extends our apologies for this unauthorized action by a rogue faction. The Emperor will be sending a senior representative to address these matters directly." As the Haxan security forces escorted the struggling Gro and his supporters from the chamber, Ambassador Powell rose again. "High Counselor, Earth appreciates Science Director Zantur's commitment to truth and council law. We would like to take this opportunity to formally propose what we're calling the Powell Doctrine regarding protectorate responsibilities." She activated a holographic display outlining a detailed protocol. Earth proposes establishing a framework for limited protective installations on developing worlds when necessary to prevent exploitation. Such installations would be subject to strict council oversight, environmental isolation requirements, and regular compliance inspections. Powell gestured toward Dr. Mew, who stepped forward with additional technical specifications. "Our cultural specialists have developed comprehensive non-interference protocols that would allow for necessary protective presence while absolutely minimizing any risk of cultural contamination." Zantur, still standing at the Haxan podium, nodded his approval. The Haxan scientific community would welcome collaboration on refining these protocols. Perhaps this unfortunate incident can lead to improved protections for all developing civilizations. High Counselor Driza, clearly relieved by this turn toward constructive dialogue, eagerly endorsed forming a working group to develop the Powell Doctrine into formal council policy. As the emergency session transformed into a productive discussion of protectorate protocols, Zik found himself updating his analysis of human strategy yet again. "They've completely inverted the situation," he murmured to Vorax. "From defending against accusations to establishing new council doctrine. And somehow they knew exactly when Xantur would make his move against Grow." "Do you think they coordinated with the Haxan scientists beforehand?" Vorax wondered. "Almost certainly," Zik replied, his skin cycling through analytical patterns. "Which means they've been cultivating relationships with moderate Haxan factions, probably since they first joined the council. They didn't just react to Grow's provocation. They were several moves ahead the entire time." Zik began updating his official recording, adding a significant amendment to his previous assessments of human diplomatic capabilities, where he had once categorized them as potential threats requiring monitoring. He now found himself considering a new classification: potential guardians, warranting cautious partnership. As the session concluded, Zik observed the Earth delegation departing. Ambassador Powell and Commander Foster walked side by side, their expressions once again unreadable, while Dr. Mew engaged in animated conversation with Xantur and representatives from several other species. "I've been thinking about Foster's statement regarding their polite mode," Zik told Vorax as they gathered their recording equipment. "What if that carefully cultivated diplomacy isn't just cultural development, but a deliberate, evolutionary strategy? Perhaps humans learn to contain their predatory instincts precisely because those instincts are so powerful." "A chilling thought," Vorax agreed. "A species that knows exactly how dangerous it can be, and therefore chooses restraint as a matter of policy rather than temperament. Perhaps that makes them ideal protectors for species like the Nakari," Zik suggested. "They understand predation and exploitation because they've evolved beyond their own predatory past." As they exited the chamber, Zik caught sight of the Earth delegation entering their embassy suite across the diplomatic concourse. For just a moment, he saw Commander Foster's expression change when he thought no one was watching. A cold, calculating look that vanished the instant the door closed behind them. Zik's skin rippled with a complex mixture of fascination and concern. Humans were not what they initially seemed, and the implications for galactic politics were only beginning to emerge. The following day, Zik made an unusual decision. Using his xenological recorder's override access, he tapped into the surveillance feed of the Earth Embassy's conference room. He justified this ethical breach to himself as necessary for complete documentation of this pivotal diplomatic event. Though his skin flushed a guilty purple as he activated the feed. Within the secure room, Ambassador Powell sat at the head of a conference table, with Commander Foster and Dr. Mew flanking her. A holographic projection of Admiral Wu hovered above the table's center. "The Powell Doctrine is gaining surprising support," the ambassador was saying. "Even traditionally isolationist delegations see the value in formalized protectorate protocols." "And Xantur's faction?" Admiral Wu asked. "Strengthening by the hour," Commander Foster replied. "The Emperor's representatives arrived early this morning and immediately endorsed Xantur's actions. Grow's supporters are being systematically removed from positions of influence." "The timing worked perfectly," Dr. Mew added, consulting her data slate. "Our cultural analysis predicted the Haxan would respect decisive action backed by strength, but they needed a face-saving way to retreat from Grow's aggressive stance. Xantur provided that perfectly." "And our installation on Nari Prime?" Admiral Wu inquired. "Being formally recognized under the new doctrine," Powell answered with satisfaction. "We've achieved in 3 cycles what might have taken decades through conventional diplomacy." The fleet remains on standby? Foster asked. Admiral Wu nodded. Dispersed but ready, though I doubt we'll need them again in this sector. The Haxan respect strength, and we've demonstrated ours. Powell's expression grew serious. Let's be clear about our objectives moving forward. Earth's responsibility is to protect developing civilizations like the Nikari while allowing their natural cultural evolution. We're not building an empire. We're establishing a framework for ethical coexistence. The Council is beginning to see that, Dr. Mew observed. Our willingness to back diplomacy with force, but equally our restraint in using that force, makes us unique among the major powers. What they're seeing, Foster added with that cold smile that didn't reach his eyes, is that our polite mode is a choice, not a weakness, and that makes all the difference. Zik quickly terminated the connection, his skin cycling through guilt, fascination, and concern. He had violated protocol by accessing the private conversation, but the insights gained were invaluable for his xenological analysis. Back in his quarters, Zik finalized his updated report on human diplomatic and military strategy. Humanity's approach to galactic diplomacy appears guided by a dualistic philosophy that merits careful study. They genuinely prefer peaceful resolution and ethical coexistence, yet maintain ready capacity for overwhelming force. Unlike many council species who evolve toward either aggressive expansion or pacifistic cooperation, humans seem to have developed a hybrid approach, consciously choosing restraint while maintaining their predatory capabilities in reserve. This polite mode Commander Foster referenced is not merely a diplomatic posture, but a defining characteristic of their species' approach to interstellar relations. They developed it through millennia of internal conflict, learning that cooperation ultimately proved more advantageous than constant warfare, yet never fully abandoning their capacity for the latter. In the Sector 7 incident, humanity demonstrated several key strategies that warrant particular attention. 1. Strategic ambiguity regarding military capabilities. 2. Cultivation of moderate factions within potentially hostile powers. 3. Willingness to reinterpret treaty obligations when necessary for protective purposes. 4. Rapid alternation between diplomatic and military postures. 5. Exploitation of internal divisions within opposing forces. Most significantly, humans appear to have developed a self-awareness regarding their own predatory instincts that many council species lack. They know precisely how dangerous they can be, and therefore choose restraint as a deliberate policy rather than as a biological imperative. Recommendation: while continued monitoring remains prudent, I propose reclassifying humanity from potential threat, requiring supervision, to potential guardian warranting partnership. Their unique evolutionary history on a death world, combined with their demonstrated commitment to protecting developing civilizations, suggests they may be ideally suited for selective protectorate responsibilities under appropriate council oversight. Final observation: humanity's understanding of warfare, combined with their preference for peace when possible, may make them the most effective guardians for vulnerable civilizations precisely because they know exactly what threatens them. Zik transmitted his report to the Council's xenological archives, his skin settling into a thoughtful blue-violet as he contemplated the implications of his analysis. The emergence of humanity as a significant galactic power would reshape Council politics for cycles to come, particularly if the Powell Doctrine became standard protocol. As Zik prepared to close his workstation, a notification appeared. The Council's Classification Committee had received his recommendation and scheduled a hearing to consider reclassifying humanity's status. The official acknowledgement contained a single additional note. Recorder Talks is requested to provide full documentation of all observations leading to this recommendation. Zik's skin flushed guilty purple once more. He would need to carefully edit his notes to remove any evidence of unauthorized surveillance of the Earth Embassy. Yet the core of his analysis remained sound. Humans were indeed something new in the galactic community, predators who chose peace without forgetting how to fight. The next cycle would bring new challenges, as the Council debated the Powell Doctrine and humanity's broader role in galactic affairs. But one thing had become undeniably clear to all who witnessed the confrontation with the Haxan. When humanity's polite mode switched off, the galaxy would do well to pay attention. Zik found himself oddly hopeful about this strange species' potential contributions. Perhaps what the Council needed most was precisely this combination of diplomatic restraint backed by the capacity for decisive action. A guardian that understood both peace and war intimately enough to navigate the complex ethical terrain between them. His final observation, added as a personal note rather than an official conclusion, simply read, "The most dangerous predator may be the one that chooses not to hunt until hunting becomes necessary." 2 standard cycles later, Zik and Vorax stood on an observation platform overlooking the newly established Interspecies Cooperation Center. Below them, a human delegation, led by Ambassador Powell, was conducting a tour for representatives from 17 Council species, including a prominent contingent of Haxan scientists headed by Xantur. "The Powell Doctrine passed final ratification this morning," Vorax noted, his eyes tracking the diverse group. 12 protective installations have already been authorized under the new protocols, 7 of them under human supervision. "And Grow?" Zik inquired, though he already knew the answer. "Removed from all positions of authority and facing criminal charges before the Haxan Imperial Court," Vorax replied. "The Emperor's representative made it quite clear that Grow's faction acted without authorization and in violation of multiple Imperial edicts." Zik's skin rippled with thoughtful blue. How convenient for all parties. The Haxan Empire avoids Council sanctions by blaming everything on a rogue faction. Earth establishes its protective doctrine as standard protocol, and several developing civilizations gain enhanced security without direct interference. "You sound skeptical," Vorax observed. "Not skeptical, impressed," Zik clarified. "Consider the sequence of events. Humans detect prohibited weapons research, identify the responsible Haxan faction, cultivate relationships with moderate Haxan scientists, position their fleet secretly, provoke Grow into overreaching, then allow Xantur to expose the entire operation while simultaneously proposing a new doctrine that enhances their influence." "You believe it was all planned?" Vorax asked, his central eyes widening. "Not all planned, but certainly all anticipated as potential outcomes," Zik replied. "I suspect humans are constantly preparing for multiple scenarios, ready to adapt their strategy as events unfold. Remember Commander Foster's reference to practicing for theoretical invasions? They've been wargaming diplomacy for millennia." Below them, Ambassador Powell was introducing Dr. Mew to a group of xenobiologists, the cultural specialist animatedly explaining something that caused the assembled scientists to lean forward with interest. "What fascinates me most," Zik continued, "is that I genuinely believe they prefer peace. Their polite mode isn't merely strategic. They would rather solve problems through cooperation and ethical engagement. Yet they never forget the alternative." "A species of contradictions," Vorax mused. "Or perhaps a species that has simply accepted its own contradictory nature," Zik suggested. "They've embraced both their capacity for violence and their desire for peace, rather than pretending either doesn't exist." As the tour continued below, Commander Foster separated briefly from the main group, looking up toward the observation platform. Though Zik knew the human couldn't possibly see them through the one-way transparency field, he had the unsettling feeling that Foster somehow knew they were there, observing. The commander's expression remained neutral, but he offered a small nod in their general direction before rejoining the delegation. "Did you see that?" Vorax whispered. "I did," Zik confirmed, his skin shifting to a wary orange. "Perhaps we should revise our assumptions about human perceptual capabilities as well. Or perhaps, Vorax suggested, he simply understands that someone is always watching and acts accordingly. Another contradiction, Zik noted. Complete transparency and perfect opacity, simultaneously. As they departed the observation platform, Zik found himself contemplating how the Council would adapt to this new, human-influenced paradigm. For thousands of cycles, the galactic community had operated according to well-established protocols and power balances. The emergence of a species that could credibly stand as protector for developing civilizations, not through overwhelming military might or technological superiority, but through a unique combination of diplomatic flexibility and strategic resolve, would inevitably reshape those ancient patterns. The question that remained, and that would likely define the next phase of galactic politics, was whether humanity would maintain that careful balance between their polite mode and their predatory capabilities as their influence expanded. The Council had witnessed both faces of humanity now, the diplomatic partner and the strategic enforcer. But which would ultimately define their role in galactic civilization remained to be seen. 1 week later, the Grand Council chamber was filled once again, this time for a formal reclassification hearing. The Classification Committee had reviewed Zik's recommendation and called for testimony from various species who had interacted with humans during their 7 cycles of Council membership. Zik sat at the recorder's bench, carefully documenting every statement. Ambassador Powell and her team were present, but seated in the observer section rather than at the Earth delegation station, protocol for species whose classification was under review. High Counselor Driza presided over the proceedings, calling witnesses in sequence. Xantur spoke eloquently about human intervention against Gro's faction. Representatives from 3 developing civilizations that had accepted human protection under the Powell Doctrine testified to the careful non-interference protocols implemented by Earth installations. Even traditionally isolationist species acknowledged that humanity's approach to protectorate responsibilities demonstrated unusual restraint. When all testimony had concluded, High Counselor Dreza addressed the chamber. The Classification Committee has reviewed all evidence regarding humanity's role in the galactic community. Recorder Tox's recommendation to reclassify humans from potential threat requiring supervision to potential guardian warranting partnership has been given full consideration. Driza turned toward the Earth observers. Ambassador Powell, does Earth wish to make a final statement before the committee renders its decision? Powell rose gracefully. High Counselor, esteemed representatives, Earth is honored by the Council's thoughtful review of our classification status. We wish only to reiterate our commitment to ethical coexistence, protection of developing civilizations, and respect for Council protocols. Whatever the committee decides, we will continue to pursue these principles. As Powell resumed her seat, Zik noticed Commander Foster lean close to whisper something in her ear. The ambassador's expression remained neutral, but she gave an almost imperceptible nod. High Counselor Dreza activated the committee's decision display. The Classification Committee has determined that humanity's status shall be revised to Emerging Guardian under Provisional Partnership. This classification acknowledges humanity's demonstrated protective capabilities while maintaining appropriate oversight during this transitional period. The Chamber responded with mixed reactions. Some delegations clearly approved, while others maintained reserved expressions. The Earth observers received the decision with characteristic composure, though Zik thought he detected a hint of satisfaction in Ambassador Powell's slight smile. As the session concluded and representatives began departing, Zik finalized his recording of this historic reclassification. Humanity had achieved in 7 cycles what most species required generations to accomplish, a formal recognition of their constructive role in galactic affairs. Vorax joined Zik as they exited the chamber. An appropriate decision, I think, Vorax commented. Recognition of their potential without removing all supervision. Indeed, Zik agreed, his skin cycling through thoughtful patterns. Though I suspect humans would have continued exactly as they have regardless of the classification. They seem to operate according to their own internal ethical framework, rather than merely conforming to external expectations. They paused as they noticed the Earth delegation ahead of them in the diplomatic concourse. Ambassador Powell was engaged in conversation with representatives from several species, while Dr. Mew appeared to be explaining some complex concept to a group of cultural attachés. Commander Foster stood slightly apart, his watchful gaze sweeping the concourse, until it landed directly on Zik and Vorax. For a brief moment, Zik had the distinct impression that Foster knew exactly who they were, and precisely what role Zik's recommendation had played in the reclassification decision. The commander gave them that same small nod he had offered at the Cooperation Center, then turned his attention back to the diplomatic gathering. "Do you ever wonder," Vorax asked quietly, "what would happen if humans decided the Council itself wasn't adequately protecting developing civilizations? If they determined that the entire system needed modification?" "Let us hope their polite mode remains engaged for such considerations," Zik replied, his skin shifting to a concerned violet. "For now, I believe they genuinely prefer working within established structures while gradually reforming them from within." "And if that changes?" Vorax pressed. Zik considered the question carefully. "Then the galaxy will discover whether the rest of us have a polite mode that can be switched off as effectively as theirs." As they watched the human delegation continue their diplomatic engagements, moving smoothly from one conversation to another with that characteristic controlled composure, Zik found himself oddly reassured. Humanity's duality, their capacity for both reasoned diplomacy and calculated force, made them unpredictable, certainly, but also uniquely valuable in a galaxy where both approaches were sometimes necessary. The Council had witnessed humanity's polite mode switch off, and then switch back on again. They had seen the predator beneath the diplomat, and the diplomat who could leash the predator. Understanding both aspects was essential to understanding humans themselves, a species shaped by conflict who had chosen cooperation, without forgetting how to fight when fighting became necessary. In his final personal notation, unshared with the official archives, Zik wrote, "Perhaps the most trustworthy guardian is not one who has never known violence, but one who understands violence intimately enough to choose peace instead, while maintaining the capacity to defend that choice when necessary. If humanity can maintain this balance as their influence grows, they may indeed become the protectors the galaxy needs, precisely because they remember what it means to be predators." The question that would define the coming cycles of galactic politics remained open. Would the Council accept humanity's expanded role, and would humanity continue to choose their polite mode when faced with new challenges? The answer would shape not only Earth's future in the galactic community, but potentially the development of countless civilizations under their growing protective umbrella. As Ambassador Powell concluded her diplomatic conversations and prepared to depart with her team, she glanced briefly in Zik and Vorax's direction. Her expression revealed nothing, but Zik had studied humans long enough now to recognize the subtle shifts in their body language. There was confidence there, certainly, but also something else, a quiet determination that suggested Earth's new classification was merely the beginning of a much longer journey. The galaxy would be watching closely as that journey unfolded. And somewhere beneath the surface of every diplomatic exchange, every treaty negotiation, every protectorate arrangement, would be the knowledge that humanity's polite mode remained exactly that, a mode, not a permanent state, a choice that could be unmade when circumstances required. For better or worse, the Council had witnessed that transformation once. Whether they would see it again remained to be seen. But no one who had been present during the confrontation with Grow would ever forget what they had learned. When humanity's polite mode switched off, the galaxy held its breath, and those who had provoked the change rarely made the same mistake twice.